All right, and we're live here on week 3 of the NFL season. Welcome to the Sportable.is show, Hot Takes and Hot Cakes, where myself and my gorgeous co-host will be giving you up-to-the-minute fantasy football advice here on Sunday morning. So, Mr. Gorgeous co-host, why don't you introduce yourself and
Wow.
and say what you think.
Well, thank you, Matt. In a term used to describing that even my mom wouldn't use. I'll take it, though. I'm pumped. I'm ready. I mean, this week's big for fantasy owners, too. I mean, if you started 0-2, this is a week where you want to make the right moves. If you have a couple tough lineup decisions, if you drafted a deep lineup, because you got to get to 1-2. You do not want to drop to 0-3, especially if your league is a 14 playoff. So this is big stuff. I'm pumped.
Indeed, it is. And since we were talking about, fantasy owners in a bind, if they're 0-2, I think the biggest bind so far, it looks like this morning, isn't just coming across the wire. It looks to be that Arian Foster is a long shot to play today. Foster has been one of the best producers at running back this week, or not this year, and he looked to be in another good position this week. So, Dan, do you have any thoughts just right off the bat we can get into kind of early for yet another running back injury?
Yeah, I mean, I'll dive more into Foster a little bit later when we take a look at that matchup, Texans versus Giants. But as far as the injuries go, I mean, people are saying, okay, we have an unprecedented amount of injuries so far this season. That might be true. I haven't seen any study really proving this point. I've seen this. This is kind of just how it happens every year. You just really never know when they're going to come. It depends on the league you're in. If it's a deeper league, you may have had a shot at these guys. If it's a shallow league, these guys are going to be gone off your wire. So it really just now it depends. Did you get these guys? And most people handcuff. I've never been a huge believer in the handcuff strategy unless it's a coach like Andy Reid who will go with the handcuff in a full, workhorse-like role after the injury. But even those situations, Niall Davis has got a lot of hype this week, and he's running behind that same horrible Chiefs offensive line that Jamal Charles has struggled behind. So, I don't know. It's just another injury to me.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, that's definitely true about handcuffing too. It's I feel the same way. It's kind of a case-by-case basis. That's a smart way to look at it. All right, well, let's get right into. We got a couple questions just to start the show off. Dan, I know you had one that you sent to me here, and so at Dr_GI asks us, should I start Kyrie Robinson or Le'Veon Bell this week? I have a pretty clear answer. Dan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question. This, to me, is a typical fantasy question you go through every week. Do I want to play somebody like Kyrie Robinson, who has potential to be in a blowout over there in New Orleans? Because they're really – it's not necessarily the fact that they're playing a horrible run D. It's that they're going to really put it – I think they're going to win this game by a lot. I'm just going to say that. So I think he's going to get a lot of touches. I think they're going to be playing from ahead, and he's going to have a good game flow. But to me, it's just to the point with Le'Veon Bell where you cannot bench him. What we've seen through the first 2 weeks is the guy who ran basically a 4.5 at 230 pounds. This is a guy who has good agility, scores. This is a guy who's really a top talent that was playing injured last year, and it was obvious now as you watch him make cuts and explode on the field. He just looks like a clear-cut RB1, and I don't bench clear-cut RB1s regardless of matchup. So to me, I'm going with Bell. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I love Kyrie Robinson. I was a big promoter of him before the season. I did and still do think he's the Saints' most talented running back. The guy that if they were going to feature somebody, I think he's the one who could most handle that sort of featured back workload. He's kind of good at everything. Breaks a lot of tackles too. But anyways, this is his opportunity. So you would think that maybe I would err on the side of talent. I agree that Bell is a clear-cut running back one. He's developing into a star right now. I mean, this guy could be considered one of the 5 or at least 8 best running backs in the league by this time next year. And with all the other running backs that have gotten injured or aren't playing for whatever reason, Bell's a guy who's he's going to be consistent. He's always going to be a starter. I think he's a lock for 10 points in a PPR league any given week. So yeah, that's the easy call for me. I think I don't think there's a situation where you can ever bench Bell. Even if he's playing the Panthers front seven this week, I still don't think you can put him on the bench. So
Yeah, I'm with you.
yeah, I think that's a pretty clear cut answer though. I don't know about you, but I do like Robinson as a play this week, and we'll get more into that later.
Definitely.
Okay, so a few more questions I've got on my end. Which two would you start today in a PPR league? And this comes from at EKRUP, Eric Kripka on Twitter. He asks us, which two would you start in a PPR league today? Marcus Colston, Shane Vereen, Stephen Ridley, or Ahmad Bradshaw? And I got to tell you what, this is a question I don't really know if I can. I like all these options today, honestly. So this is kind of a tough one for me. Colston, he was shut out last week, didn't receive a single target against Cleveland, but he's another guy that just like Breeze, he takes his game to another level when they play at home, and I like them. I think they're going to crush the Vikings today. So that's a tough one. I want to play Colston. Green, I think he's an every week start in a PPR league. And especially against the Raiders, I think he'll have a great day. And that kind of goes with Stephen Ridley. Same thing with game flow, game script, and everything like that. I think that Ridley is the guy who they want to close out games. While he's pretty unpredictable week to week, I feel pretty certain that he's gonna crush it today because they're gonna smack the Raiders around, and they'll want him to close out the game. And then Bradshaw, I like him against the Jaguars. So this is a tough one where I like all the options. For me, I think I'm going to go Colston and Vereen, though I certainly don't hate starting Bradshaw, but Ridley's probably not a play in a PPR league given all the other options. Dan, it's a tough question. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a tough question. I'm going to actually go against the grain here as far as the PPR thing goes. It's very hard to advise somebody. Ridley was the fourth, right, Matt?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's very hard to advise somebody like Ridley in a non-PPR, but I just have to stick by the script, and I think that this game is going to be a blowout for the Patriots. And if you look at last week's game, Shane Vereen didn't really play much. So just getting the numbers up real quick, you had Vereen was only on the field for 20 snaps last week, and this is compared to Stephen Ridley, who played 39. So I mean, Ridley doubled him in snaps in the blowout. I think there's a chance that this can repeat itself in this type of game, and this is another reason why I wouldn't roll with Ahmad Bradshaw. I actually tweeted earlier this week that as hard as it is for me to say this could be the week you start Trent Richardson. Game flow is going to look good for him. He's going to get a lot of snaps against this Jaguars team. They're beat up. They can't move the ball on offense, and then that really affects them on defense. So I'm going to go with Ridley and Colston here. It's not ideal to advise somebody like Ridley in a PPR, but I just think he's going to get so many more snaps than the other two.
Hey, you know what? I think that's a good call. I'm rolling with Ridley in a lot of leagues today. So, like I said, I don't think there's a real wrong answer here. I think all those guys are going to produce today. So, Eric, I don't think you can go too wrong there. But, just you can take our advice for what it's worth. And our next question comes from a good friend on Twitter at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. A guy, he's real supportive of a lot of writers out there. So shout out to Jeff there for that. He asked us, the question that's on everybody's mind today is Alfred Blue now worth a start today? What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, so I'm going to definitely take a contrarian route here, and I knew I would when we got into this question and when we dug into this game. So I'm going to say no, he's not. Granted, we have seen that the coaching staff favors him over Jonathan Grimes, but I find that a little surprising because Grimes looked to me like the much better runner on tape in the preseason, and all the stats really said the same thing. So it kind of does seem surprising that Blue gets the start over him, but it looks like he might outtouch him. I'm not sold that that's a true workhorse or even lead back type deal where it's 70-30 yet for Blue. But really my main reason for not liking this is I don't like the matchup. The Giants' run defense, for all that has been said about them, has actually been really dominant this year. They've graded out as the fourth best run defense as far as Pro Football Focus's game charts have gone. And as far as you watching the game on TV, you'll see a lot of negative stops in that first game. Neither Bush or Bell could get going. Bell finally broke off 2 runs at the end that helped his average, but it wasn't pretty. Last week, really, Andre Ellington had a few decent runs, but a lot of them were on second and third and longs where he kind of just broke out on passing downs when the defense was dropping back into zone. So I think this week the Giants won't have to scheme against the pass against Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they're just going to say, we'll stop your run, Texans. You beat us through the air, beat our corners, and I think it's going to be a bad game for the Texans running backs. Your thoughts, Matt?
I'm going to kind of agree with you there that I wouldn't start Blue today. It's just a little too unpredictable, and given how many running backs have all of a sudden made themselves available, like Kyrie Robinson, Niall Davis, all these guys that are suddenly looking like decent bets that might not have been a week ago. I'm just not all that keen on starting a guy like Blue, who I'm not really high on either. I haven't really seen much to impress. I know Grimes is more of the physical talent, and yeah, he just looked better to me. I'm surprised that they've kind of, that they've, gone away from him, even though, hey, we don't even know if that's the case yet. Yes, Blue is listed as the second guy on the depth chart, and he got some work last week when they were smacking the Raiders around, which is kind of a theme, it sounds like. And so I know he's the second on the depth chart, but hey, also don't forget Ronnie Brown is on the roster, and while that sounds like it should be a joke at this stage of Ronnie Brown's career, that guy was productive a little bit last year for the Chargers. He just kind of seems like he doesn't want to go away. He's a guy who catches a lot. He caught the ball well in San Diego during his few years there. I'm not so sure that he won't have a little bit of a role and take away any pass catching reps from those guys who are gonna back up Foster, which we've seen Foster get fed through the passing game. Those touches might go to Brown, so I think this is kind of a situation to avoid for this week until we get some more clarity on it. So yeah, I think that's the way I would go. I would advise him not to risk starting Blue. Definitely, make him a precautionary pickup this morning, especially if you don't have waivers at this stage of the week. But yeah, it just depends on who you're going to drop for him. But yeah, so that's I think that's our answer to that. That's all the questions we have right now. If anyone out there is watching and they want to send in more, with him at the end of the show. But now we're gonna dig into the matchups a little. And the first one we have on the docket is Saints and Vikings. We've kind of alluded to this one. The Saints, this is their first home game, and if you followed the team throughout the last couple of years, that they're a dominant team at home. And they're much like the Seahawks. They're a different team at home too. They just play better with that crowd at their back. Breeze is more efficient at home. Peyton is more aggressive at home. It's just a totally different team. And then you have the Vikings coming in, kind of running into a buzzsaw. And things have not, obviously, if you followed the NFL lately, things are not going well for the Vikings. With the Adrian Peterson situation there. It's kind of right now, kind of in turmoil. They still have Matt Castle, who threw 4 interceptions last week, starting for them, which, I don't think that's going to last long. I think Bridgewater, I don't know if I'd throw him out there in this game, but I feel like he's going to see the field soon. But as for the Saints, they're individual players. You start Breeze every week. But at home, I think you raise your expectations that he's going to be, he's definitely going to finish within the top, 2 or 3 quarterbacks for sure. Against this defense, he could even finish as the top scoring quarterback this week. As for the running backs, Mark Ingram's out for a month, it looks like. So Pierre Thomas, I think he still goes on and plays in his, his usual pass catching role. Especially at home again. I'm excited about him. Kyrie Robinson, we kind of touched on him earlier, but to me, like I said, I think he's the best runner out of the 3 guys, Ingram, Tuss, and then himself. I think he's the best runner. I think he can do a little bit in the passing game, so I expect him to pick up some catches too. Just get me to stop talking for a second. Dan, what do you think about Robinson?
Yeah, I like Robinson, and mostly I like the fact that the matchup's pretty good. This Vikings run defense was gashed last week by the Patriots. They're not necessarily ranked too low as far as Pro Football Focus's rankings go, but they're in the middle of the pack. And again, it's a road game. Robinson's a player I wrote about a lot in the offseason because early on in OTAs, Sean Payton was raving about him, about how much really more mature he was coming into the season. His pass protection had improved. And then out of nowhere, really, Ingram started getting all the first-team reps, and that was his job. But really, we've got a guy who's talented, in a great situation, and has a great matchup. So, again, while I wouldn't have said, start Bell over him, I like him, and I like him as a spot start this week.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to have TJ on later to do all our daily fantasy stuff, but I'll tell you right now, I'm rolling with Robinson on FanDuel a lot at his cheap 4,700 price tag. I mean, I think that's the cheapest guy that's going to get a ton of touches this week in a good matchup at home. I think Robinson's a no-brainer in daily leagues, but we'll see if TJ tells me I'm wrong. Probably, who knows? But anyways, so more to all the pass catchers from the Saints. You have Colston. We touched on him earlier. I think we both think he's a start with the Saints at home and everything. And then the other wide receivers, that's the interesting part. Brandon Cooks, Kenny Stills, those guys. Do we see them playing well this week? I mean, I think Cooks is a pretty decent play with the Saints being at home and everything. I expect at least it's going to be. I think one of those two is going to bust off a long touchdown. Stills and Cooks, that is. It's just a question of which one. And I mean, that's always going to be the question with those two. But I think I'm just going to bet on Cooks, who's been the healthier, more involved player so far. And then, the last real offensive guy for the Saints is Jimmy Graham, and we know he's an every week starter. But again, just like Breeze, every week starter, but you raise your expectations when he's at home because this offense is just so dominant there. Graham has been probably of all the first round picks, him and Calvin Johnson, the two running backs, might be the most valuable players in fantasy football so far. I mean, they've produced exactly what you'd expect so far. So Graham is another great play this week. And then the Saints defense, if you're in a defense league, I think they're gonna be an easy bet to get a lot of points against this beleaguered Vikings offense. You disagree with anything I just said there, Dan?
Actually, agree with two things strongly, and I'm iffy on a third. So we'll get into the first one that I'm iffy on, and that's Cooks going off instead of Stills. Kenny Stills was actually one of my prime breakout candidates this year. John Moore did a great piece over at RotoViz on him, just showing off his measurables that are really much better than people think. He goes 6 foot, 210 with a 4.39 40, and he's really great. And the fact of the matter is, in the offseason, originally in the OTAs, because I was covering the Saints for Fox Sports at the time on their beat at Fox Sports Southwest, and he was dominating OTAs. Breeze was raving about him, about the routes he was running this year. Last year, he kind of ran a lot of vertical clear-out routes. Sometimes Breeze would target him, sometimes he wouldn't. This year, during OTAs, he was running all sorts of routes. His route tree had just expanded tenfold. So, and Breeze was targeting him a ton in OTAs and in the mini camps, and then bam, he got that injury. So, I mean, he looks like he's probably getting healthier. He had a decent first start, and I think he has a decent shot in deeper leagues to really make the play this week that we were talking about. But then, onto the other points I actually really agree with you on, and that's I'm a little worried about this Vikings offense minus Peterson. He's one of the few players at running back in this league who can tilt a defense and tilt the way they're playing and open up things for the passing game. That passing game looked brutal last week without Peterson. It was hard to watch. You talked about Castle throwing 4 interceptions, but it really dampens the outlook on a lot of their players, their skill position players. Now, I personally can't afford to sit Patterson any week if I own him. I do own him in one of my main leagues because I was a huge proponent of him, which actually I wrote a card about on Sportable this past week. But he's just he could score on any play, so I can't bench him. But I'm not expecting a huge week. With him, it's really like you play him, and hopefully this is the week he gets that touch and houses it. But the last thing I wanted to touch on was the Saints defense, because some of you might have known this who follow me. I wrote a 1,200-word piece on why the Saints defense would be the Chiefs defense of this year, and really it's just been disappointing to see how bad the corners have been in coverage. So after grading out as a top 15 corner last year on Pro Football Focus, Keenan Lewis has just been burned over and over this season, and it makes no sense to me. Across from him, they had to cut Champ Bailey because he was injured and not producing in camp. So now they have Patrick Robinson, the former first-round bust, who just once again is getting torn coverage. So you see these coverage issues, but the real surprising issues in coverage are how poorly Kenny Vaccaro and Jarius Byrd have played. They were the key reason why I thought this defense would be unbelievable, combined with their pass rushers, Cameron Jordan, Akeem Hicks. But they're both not playing well, especially Vaccaro. He's really not playing well. They grade out really poor in Pro Football Focus, and you just see that there was one great great breakdown somebody on Bleacher Report did where they showed a play where Julio Jones really had a 15 yards cushion to get in between a zone of Jarius Byrd playing deep safety and the corner who he just torched. So This week, yes, I like the I like the play because they can give up a ton of yards and still score a lot of points just based on Castle turning the ball over. But I'm a little worried about them long term, and those are my thoughts for that game.
Yeah, I think the Saints defense, I kind of expect them to rebound. There's too many talented players there. But you're right, it has been a big disappointment so far. And they were a defense that I like to target, as a streaming candidate and everything early on in the season. But hey, we'll see if it turns around. I think this week it will. But moving on to the next game, and that's Giants-Texans. And Dan, I'll let you take this one since you know the Giants well and everything. So why don't you kick this one off?
Yeah, so we touched on the Texans running game versus the Giants run defense, so we won't get back into that. But let's first start with this Giants offense that unfairly took a lot of blame last week from the media, which really just anyone who wrote that Eli Manning had a bad game to me I'll go on the record of saying was not watching the game. So Eli Manning actually, to me, and to mostly anyone who actually watched the game, looked as good as he's looked in 2 years almost. He unfortunately suffered 4 miserable drops, 3 by Cruz, 1 by Randall. 2 were for first downs on third downs, and then 1 was a big play at the end to try to get him back into the game. But he finally looked comfortable behind that line. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm ready to start him in any fantasy leagues. I'm not going to say they're ready to see him make that kind of performance again this week because a lot of it had to do with this Arizona Cardinals pass rush that just wasn't getting there and wasn't beating the Giants line. Now he faces a Texans team that has J.J. Watt. So I went to Wisconsin, as some of you might have known who have listened to this podcast before. So I got to see J.J. Watt a lot firsthand. This is an animal of a human being that cannot be stopped by anything. So he's going to be coming at Justin Pugh, and he'll probably hit off John Jerry at right guard between that gap, and I just can't see the Giants coming up with any way to stop him. J.J. Watt has already graded out as one of the best defensive players on Pro Football Focus this year, which is not surprising to me at all. They've also got a lot of production out of Jared Crick, a guy out of Nebraska who I originally liked coming into the draft. I'm in a sense not for this week because he's playing the Giants, but happy to see him do well. So I'm really not prepared to tell you to start Giants this week in this matchup. I don't like it for the Giants just based on the offensive line versus the Texans' defensive line. On the other side of the ball, I think the Giants are a much better defense than people are giving them credit for. They've been on the field a lot. They were on the field a lot the first game because the offense was punting and turning the ball over. But last week, it was just a lot of penalties that extended drives. But if you look at Stanton's numbers, he was under 50% completion. He really threw for 150. And yes, it's Drew Stanton, but he has Larry Fitzgerald and Michael Floyd at skill positions as well as Andre Ellington. So I really don't love this Texans offense with Fitzpatrick, Hopkins and Andre and Blue. I think that Giants can really equalize Andre and Hopkins with Prince Amukamara and DRC at the corners. So this to me is a matchup to avoid for fantasy for daily plays and just in fantasy in general. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as some of the other games, and neither does Vegas really either. You have any thoughts on it, Matt?
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you were saying, that I think it's a little bit of a dead zone matchup for fantasy plays this week. I mean, you could start a guy like Rashad Jennings because you know he's going to get the workload, but I think you temper your expectations for pretty much everybody involved. I do think Andre Johnson at this point is an every week start, especially in PPR leagues. So I don't think you can bench him.
Right.
So guys like Johnson and Jennings, I think he still play, but yeah, I don't really see this being a high scoring game. I think Watt will make things definitely, as he always does, he will make things difficult, for the opposing offense, especially one with a line like the Giants. I'm not excited about the Giants this year. I think it's been such a mess. I'm more just kind of, again, seeing if this offense can look better, if these receivers can actually catch the ball. It's been real disappointing to see Victor Cruz like that recently. I think we might have just lost Dan there for a second. So if you're watching the show, I think it might just be me right now. I think Dan just dropped out. Hey, all right, this is a little bit unexpected. But as far as this matchup goes, we're talking about the Giants and the Texans. Like I'm saying, I think that that's just kind of a one to avoid for fantasy purposes. You play your starters like Johnson and Jennings. I think you play those guys. But I'm not really rolling with a Fitzpatrick or an Eli at quarterback. those Giants receivers. I might even consider honestly benching Victor Cruz this week. He's just had such a poor showing that it's hard for me to confidently say that he's going to rebound. So the next matchup we were going to cover before Dan dropped out here was the Steelers and the Panthers, and I think we'll wait to see if he can come back on. But I write about the Panthers a lot for Black and Blue Review now, and this is an interesting matchup because we have a team that hasn't run the ball well in Carolina going against a team in Pittsburgh that while they have this great reputation as a big run defense. They haven't been very good. I believe they're 30th in the NFL defending the run. Baltimore, they really built a sustaining attack against them last Thursday. And hang on just a second. We're trying to get Dan back in the show. Oh, here we go. I think we've got him back. So you can stop listening to me yak my face off here. But, all right, Dan, do we have you back?
Yeah, I'm back. I don't know what happened there, guys, but somehow I got disconnected. I'm glad I'm back.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I'm glad you're back, too. I was going into quite a little diatribe there by myself.
Good. Okay. You got to hit that. That's so fun.
But anyway, so I just kind of moved it along to talking about the Steelers and the Panthers.
Okay.
But as I was saying to our audience before you got back on, I was just mentioning that this is like I was saying is this is a game that the Panthers haven't run the ball well. The Steelers haven't defended the run well at all either. Baltimore really they built kind of a sustaining ground attack against them last Thursday where they really just kind of kept punishing the defense and eventually that kind of iced the game for them. And in Week 1, Cleveland really gashed the Steelers too. And I know we're not used to seeing the Steelers being this bad on defense, but it's kind of the new reality. Pittsburgh's just not the run defense that they used to be. And so I'm just interested to see if I wrote about this at Black and Blue Review, as I mentioned. Was my matchup I highlighted this week was how can the Panthers exploit this this poor run defense, the Steelers, when they're not running the ball that well. And one thing I noticed from watching the tape is that, Jonathan Stewart, you look at his yards per carry, and it's, 2.5 last week against the Lions, 2.2 against the Buccaneers in Week 1, and you think, oh, man, this is an injured guy. He just doesn't have it anymore. And while he's certainly not the elite athletic talent he was coming out of Oregon as a draft prospect, Stewart is still running well. He's still running hard. He's breaking a lot of tackles. But the problem is they're all coming behind the line of scrimmage because this offensive line is not playing all that well, especially as a run blocking unit. They've been a little bit better in pass protection than I expected them to be, but they're not opening running lanes. I mean, Nick Fairley pretty much was breaking into the Panthers' backfield almost every play last week. There was a couple where he caught Stewart, 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and Stewart would still shake him off because he can still do that type of stuff. He's still a really talented runner. So if you're banking on the Panthers running attack this week, you're kind of hoping that they improve their offensive line and that they don't run from these bunch formations, which I don't know about you, Dan, but that drives me crazy when I see teams run out of these tight formations with so many bodies in the line of scrimmage. I kind of highlighted this on BBR this week, was just, it's so much better to run from the spread. And when the Panthers did run from the spread last week, they actually got a lot of yards. So I think there's some potential for Stewart. If you're looking for kind of a desperation flex play from this matchup, I think Stewart can be that guy. I think he can bust a few runs maybe. So that's the matchup I think that's most important to look for in this game. Dan, do you have any thoughts on this game, Steelers and Panthers?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this game, actually. I'm going to try to get to them fairly quickly. But first I want to touch on what you just mentioned, which I thought was awesome. I think the only thing I hate more than running out of tight formations, which is just devastating to me when I'm watching, is running out of tight formations on second and long. This is one of the worst things I can see a team do. This I was tweeting about it. Pep Hamilton was just letting it rip the other night with just some atrocious play calling, including a run on the last drive when you have 11 personnel that looks awesome with Hakeem Nicks, T.Y. Hilton, and Reggie Wayne, and one of those two tight ends, which we, as you know, if you watch the show a lot, we would not advise Toby Fleener, but you put Dwayne Allen in, and it's just like, it's unbelievable when you see these teams do this, especially on second and long. It's such a devastating waste of play. So yeah, I agree with that, and while I think on touching on Jonathan Stewart, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because people just look at this stat line, this average, and just make these assumptions, kind of like what they did with Le'Veon Bell's yards per carry last year, and look where that got them. Sean Siegel, a guy who writes for Pro Football Focus, one of my favorite guys out there. He's the fantasy football contrarian, if you guys know him on Twitter. The guy who advises the zero running back strategy. He talked about Stewart last week just to show how much better he was than the stats show, and he forced 8 missed tackles on 15 carries last week, which is just unbelievable. Those stats. He put it in context by saying over a full season, Moreno only forced 35 missed tackles. So really, wow. I think that a breakout week is coming for Stewart. I'm a little disappointed that D'Angelo's back, just from a fantasy football perspective, because I was a big buyer in Stewart this offseason after watching him play in the preseason. He looks very fresh to me, but I still think that Stewart, I stand by the fact that Stewart will eventually be the lead back in that. But really, the matchup I want to highlight that I love is I love Cam Newton as a daily play this week. I love Benjamin. This Steelers defense is really, really, really bad. Like, as in the worst in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. They're not getting it done on the line, which is the big problem. And as you just mentioned, the Panthers have had struggles along the offensive line, so this is really a perfect matchup for them. They get to face a nose tackle, Cam Thomas, who is graded out as the worst in the league. He's a cast off from the Chargers. He's really not meant to play in the league. And then Brett Kiesel and Cameron Hayward are not playing well. This is their 3-man line in the 3-4. And as much as Dick LeBeau wants to confuse things with his own blitzes, he doesn't have the personnel to do it. Lawrence Timmons is getting eaten up. He's he's been the worst pass coverage linebacker in the NFL, which is really just not good. And Ryan Shazier's had a slow start. So really we're looking at Cam Newton with an ideal matchup. Why do I like Kelvin Benjamin so much? Well, he's going to see a whole lot of Ike Taylor. And after 2012, starting last season, Ike Taylor's rapid decline is just it's been in motion. He was the 7th worst pass coverage corner last year, according to Pro Football Focus. Things haven't gotten better for him. He's had a negative 2.8 grade, which is really not great. And just remember last year, to put those grades into context, he gave up 71 catches, 1,043 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And opposing quarterbacks had an 110.6 QB rating. This is just a cornerback who's done. So I don't think people are giving enough play to Kelvin Benjamin this week. He's a little injured, but one interesting thing is I'm not sure, is Kotry going to play, Matt? Do you know about this? Because he missed practice Friday, so if Kotry doesn't go, I think Benjamin has even greater chance of targets.
Yeah, I think from everything we're hearing this week, Kotry and Avant are both kind of questionable to go. I think one of them ends up playing, but it's hard to tell which one. Maybe both end up playing, but it's hard to tell which one they will. And honestly, I don't think it makes that big of a deal. Makes that big of a difference. It's not that big of a deal if either of them don't go, because this offense really, it's going to run through the ground game this week. D'Angelo, I still don't think is a certainty to play. He hasn't practiced a ton this week, but he still might go. It's gonna flow through the running game, and it's gonna Benjamin's and Olsen are gonna carry the passing game as always. I think this is one of those weeks where it doesn't even really matter much if Kotry and Avant play.
All right, cool. I'm with you on that.
I think that's just what you should expect from Carolina's offense, is that a guy like Avant might have a big week like he did last week, but I don't think there's anything sustainable in that. I mean, those guys, Kotry and Avant, are just going to kind of pick up the scraps from Olsen and Benjamin in the passing game, and it's really going to be a run-heavy offense anyways. All right, well, we're going to keep it moving if you don't have anything else to say on that matchup. And I think we're going to go right ahead to Eagles and Redskins. Big revenge game for Deshaun Jackson. Dan, what are your thoughts on this game?
I love this game. I love this game for daily fantasy plays this week. Get it going. Get people going. So let's start with the Redskins offense. I love Kirk Cousins this week. Tried to get him in all my leagues. Didn't bid enough in 2 leagues. Lost by $1 free agent budget. I'm still bitter about it. But really, he's facing an Eagles defense that hasn't been great this year, and it's only going to get worse now that Michael Kendricks is out. Their best coverage linebacker, and also really a playmaker. He's just a speedy guy who makes plays in the pass and run game. So they are either going to put Casey Matthews out there, who's at this point probably one of the 5 worst linebackers who can step on the field this week. Brother of Clay Matthews,
you could say 5 worst players to step on the field.
Yeah, this is very. Wait, is Kobe Fleener playing this week? No, I'm just kidding. So you got him, but they're also trying out first-rounder Marcus Smith this week. He got reps at inside linebacker. That could be really ugly if they try to play him on the inside out of nowhere. Maybe it's just, I'm assuming it's just for packages like third downs, but it could really get taken advantage. So Kirk Cousins, like, if you watch, I actually went back and watched the all 22 of him from last week. This is a guy who's like really good, surprisingly good. He's really calm in the pocket. He goes through his reads really well. He'll pump fake receivers open. He'll look off safeties. He's a really good fit for Gruden's system, and I like him the rest of the year, but I really like him this week. Just because I'm going to go back to this every week with any team that faces the Eagles. The game flow and the game flow and the game script is just great for opposing teams. Last year, opponents had an NFL high snaps against their defense, and this year they've surrendered the 5th most snaps in the league. So it's like you're just going to get this game after game with the way their offense is set up. Moving on, yes, Deshaun Jackson, we don't know his status yet. It's a revenge game, but I actually want to go and target Pierre Garçon in this. Pat Thorman, my buddy over at Pro Football Focus, did a great piece this week where he pointed out that in the 9 career games with Kirk Cousins, Garçon has averaged 10.5 targets, so just under 10.5 targets, sorry. So really, he's a good play this week. I really like Morris this week. As I mentioned, the Eagles have struggles on the inside at linebacker. I just think he could be getting some short yardage touchdowns like the 2 he got last week. And then moving on to the other side of the ball, I love the Eagles this week. I mean, I've been harping on this Redskins D as a D you want to exploit. That's D that will be exploited for a few weeks now. The Jaguars couldn't do it. Their offensive line is just too atrocious, thanks to signing Zane Beadles to a huge contract to play left guard, and he sucks. But you're looking at an Eagles team that didn't really look that much worse on the offensive line. That was the matchup I really wanted to see last week, the Eagles' offensive line. Granted, against the Colts' defensive line, that's not great, but I did want to see how they performed with all their injuries up front. They look great. They're going to tear up this Redskins defense. Remember, Barry Cofield's out, their nose tackle. They have 2 weak inside linebackers, a safety who actually they're getting Brendan Merriweather back, but I really think he's just an overrated name who just lowers his head into receivers and running backs all the time for unnecessary roughness penalties. So I love this matchup. I think it's going to be one of the highest scoring for fantasy purpose this week. It has a huge over-under in Vegas, so really roll with your guys here. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point that, for daily fantasy and for guys in general in standard leagues, I think you want to break ties in favor of playing guys in games like this. Green Bay and Detroit is another one this week that I think when you look at teams that both don't have very good defenses and are high-powered offenses, I think you want to play guys in those games because there's shootout potential. There's the potential that some random guy is going to have a big play. And I think guys are just going to continuously get targeted. Guys like Garçon and on the other side, Jeremy Maclin. I think you want to play those guys this week because this just has the potential to be a high-flying game. I'm going to come back to a few Washington players. You mentioned Kirk Cousins. I'm not the biggest fan of Cousins. I haven't been since the beginning.
Okay.
And I think he played well last week. Obviously, posted ridiculous numbers. I still thought he was a little inaccurate. He was a calm, in the pocket, calm guy last week. I do think he tends to get a little overwhelmed when there's bodies around him. Maybe he's an improving player. I'm certainly, open to that possibility. But I haven't really liked what I've seen from him so far in his career. And I think we've also seen that the longer he stays on the field, the worse he gets. So I wouldn't be surprised if this. I'm sure last week is going to be his best statistical game. It was at one point he was 11 for 11. I mean, it's hard to get better than that. So I do expect him to kind of regress a little. He might end up staying the starter in Washington, just with everything going on with Robert Griffin. It's a tough situation to even try to predict right now. He very well could be the starter there for the rest of the year, but I'm not rushing to I mean, I picked up Kirk Cousins a lot just to, almost just to be an asshole to my league mates, just because and to maybe use him as a piece of trade bait or something. That's fine, but I'm not thrilled about Cousins the rest of the way. And let me kind of switch gears to somebody I am excited about on Washington, and that's Niles Paul. Paul was another one that had a great game last week. I mean, he was targeted early and often by Cousins, and I know some people were saying it's just because he wasn't getting attention, and it was because he was playing against the Jaguars. But I saw this guy, torching players in coverage, and he's an athletic guy. He runs a 4.4, and he's a tight end. He used to be a wide receiver in college. He looks like honestly he's getting the hang of things, and that's to be expected from a young player who's made a position switch. That takes time, and right now he looks like a guy who's putting it all together. I saw him making contested catches, really out-physicaling guys for balls, and Cousins was just honestly throwing it up there for him to go get it. And I think that's because, they spend time on the second team together. I don't think it's wise to ever discount things like that. When two backups get in the game, like Cousins and Paul, they have a connection. So I'm comfortable rolling with Paul in daily leagues or streaming him as a tight end this week. I think he's a guy who's going to benefit from this, from this shootout style of a game. And like I said, Cousins trusts this guy. He's going to go to him. And honestly, if Paul keeps playing well, I don't see any reason why he doesn't hold that starting tight end job over Jordan Reed. Reed is an unreliable guy. He gets hurt a lot. And this isn't the coaching staff that drafted Jordan Reed or anything. They don't really have any allegiance to him. So keep an eye on Niles Paul because he might emerge as a top 10 tight end the rest of the way if he keeps playing well. Reed is injured and things just keep going this way. So I'm excited about Paul.
Yeah, I love the Niles Paul call, actually. I think the best thing you said there to me, because it doesn't really get credited much in fantasy, and it should, is that they got a chemistry thing going on. They're practicing together every day. They're on the same second team, and now they come in, and look, he's targeting him a bunch. One other thing on Paul just is that he's a converted wide receiver, and I always love to target guys like that who convert from wide receiver to tight end because he's still pretty much just a big receiver out there playing tight end. And the last thing I would say, I like your point on Cousins, and I actually would agree with your assessment up until this point. But one thing just to think about is it fair to judge his past play in Mike Shanahan's system that was very not well suited for his style of game versus Jay Gruden's system, which is really perfect for his style of pocket passing. So I think that's something we'll see over the course of this year. I don't think you should go crazy over his first start, too. I agree with you, Matt, against Jacksonville, and he has a much larger sample size of not great play. But again, I want to at least give some play to the fact that he was in a zone read, play action, bootleg system that's just not great for his skill set.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's kind of a wait and see sort of thing. Like I said, Cousins could be an improving player. This is his third year in the league. I'm totally open to that. So it's just kind of a wait and see sort of thing for me. All right, last game we're going to highlight here matchup wise, and that's Bears and Jets. It's the Monday night game. We just saw Jay Cutler really. Man, did he catch fire in the Week 2 game against the 49ers, and just didn't look great early on. Looked out of sync with his wide receivers who weren't totally healthy. But then him and Brandon Marshall, they combined for 3 touchdowns, the two of them together. Man, it was quite a thing to see. And now they get to go up against this New York Jets defense that's obviously really strong up front. But they have a weakness in the back end. I mean, the Packers just tortured them. Jordy Nelson went off for over 200 yards. Nelson is a player I love. Charted him over the summer, and I think Brandon Marshall is going to have that same sort of effect this week. I'm really going to be aggressive with the Bears players, as you should most weeks, because this is a good offense. But I'm raising expectations for guys like Marshall. I want to see a little more from how healthy Alshon Jeffrey is. He looked like he was playing, but didn't look like himself. Didn't look like Cutler had a lot of faith in him last week. With his injury and everything. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. But I think that's a good call is to play your Bears this week. But yeah, so what do you think about this game? We'll go over it real quick here.
Yeah, I like this game a lot too, especially with your Bears. You look at last week's game with the Jets, and it was just an epic collapse on defense. And what the Packers did was they just kind of went to a shotgun, we're going to throw the ball at you offense, and they moved it really well. Rex Ryan went back to his old ways. I actually watched the review of this game on the All 22. Luckily, this game, NFL Game Rewind thing, Matt, it's unreal. It's my second year doing it. It's
crazy.
It's like porn to people like us. It really is. I swear to God. Anyway, so and he went back to his old ways of just stacking that box with bluffing blitz, doing all these things, and it just left one-on-ones with the corners. And these Jets corners can't win in these one-on-ones. Antonio Allen was getting embarrassed by Jordy Nelson, and he was their best corner week 1 for the Jets. So this is just like, I think they're going to get dominated by these receivers and Cutler. I really love the Bears in this matchup, as you mentioned. On the other side of the ball, I've been a big Geno Smith and Eric Decker proponent the whole year. But I really like the way that this Bears defense played last week. On the line, they looked much better on the defensive line. And Kyle Fuller, who was one of my draft favorites, literally, I had him as my number 1 corner from the start. Love that guy. And I'm happy that he's playing. He looked awesome last week. There was one play that his second interception, he peeled off coverage on the route because he knew a corner was coming down. It was a cover 2, and just broke to the other route, to the seam, and just picked off the pass, just red Kaepernick. It was a thing of beauty. We're seeing, I think, a really, really top-notch corner develop in front of our eyes. So I don't love Geno this week. Decker, if he plays, is going to be injured. The rest of those receivers are very unaspiring. Jeff Cumberland hasn't done anything at tight end. Jason Marrow can't get the NFL game down fast. So, yeah, like you said, I'm rolling with my Bears and not my Jets.
Yeah, I will say on the Jets side, this Bears run defense still hasn't impressed me. It's still one that I think we should look to start players against. So and that brings the question up: Do you play Chris Johnson? Do you want to do that to yourself? I don't want to do that to myself. I'm actually playing Chris Ivory cheap in some daily leagues, and it doesn't look like we're going to bring TJ on today. So sorry for anyone that tuned in for daily fantasy advice, but we'll get more of that next week. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter if you have daily fantasy questions. I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on the thing now. But so Ivory, I think, is a cheap guy that I'm rolling with because I don't like to have a lot of running backs in my lineup because we've seen how much variance there is with that position. But anyway, so yeah, that's a player I like in that game. We're going to close out the hangout here today with a few of your questions from Twitter that we've gotten. Here's one that I got this just while we were on non-PPR league. Start 2 running backs on a flex: Ahmad Bradshaw, Andre Ellington, Niall Davis. Not sure if Charles is playing, if Ellington's healthy, and Bradshaw has an early game. So we got to look at these 2 options, and I guess we have to pick 2 players out of here. I'm sorry, yeah, 2 players. We got to pick: Bradshaw, Ellington, Niall Davis. Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
I touched on Bradshaw a little. Again, I'm a little worried about the game flow there. I think this could be one of those rare Trent Richardson games. Yeah. But having said, and then moving on, we've got the other 2 were Ellington and who was?
It was Niall Davis.
Niall Davis. Okay. So moving on to Niall Davis and what we've got going there, I don't start by saying I'm going to go Bradshaw and Ellington. I'll explain. Reading over fan stats this week. One of the fantasy greats in this Get Rebar does a ton of Accent Sports, RotoViz. He's really the man in the fantasy world. You know him if you're listening to this show. He pointed out that the Dolphins have allowed only 4 100-yard rushers in their last 48 games. This is a defensive line that once again has graded out well in Pro Football Focus and run defense, and this is a consistent thing for them, as you just noticed. So I don't like Niall Davis, especially with that Chiefs offensive line that has been miserable this year. So I'm going to go back and say, even though I don't love Bradshaw's game flow, I like his talent, and I think at some point the coaches have to realize he's the better option than Trent Richardson. Maybe it's this week. Just it has to happen soon. And then Ellington, I don't love him as much with Stanton, but he proved last week when he racked up over 100 yards that he is just a threat to rack up yardage and big plays in any matchup against any team. Like we mentioned before, the Giants' run defense is graded out really well this year and played really well and shut down the Lions, and then Ellington still ripped off some huge runs. He said yesterday, that his foot feels much better than it has so far this season. Great news, too, there. So, yeah, I'm rolling with Ellington and Shaw. Thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit different. I think Ellington's definitely a play. I think he's the guy who's a big part of the offense, and he's getting healthier and healthier each week, which is nice to see. So I think he's one of the guys I'm going with. And I'm going to go with Niall Davis over Ahmad Bradshaw. I know you mentioned that the coaching staff has to at some point wise up and realize he's the better option to Trent Richardson. But I don't trust Pep Hamilton to do anything other than to make our lives miserable as fantasy football players. I mean, honestly, it seems like that's his objective. He's like, I think he's a guy who must have lost a lot of fantasy leagues, and now he's like, well, you know what? I'm going to play Kobe Fleener and Trent Richardson and ruin this potentially good offense. But anyways,
I don't know. Up in a tight formation too at the same time.
He's awful. I kind of dislike the whole. I'm going to talk, a bunch of crap about offensive coordinators. So I think it's such an easy thing to do.
Yes, it is easy.
It's such an easy thing to do, but I mean, Pep is. I'll do it with Pep. He's the worst. They need to just tie him up somewhere and just send him in a rocket to the moon. I don't know, maybe something nicer like send him to a paid vacation to the Bahamas because he probably has a family. We don't need to shoot him to outer space. And just let Rob Chudzinski run that offense. He'll throw the ball, with no regard for whether it's a smart move or not. But anyways, let me get back on track here. So I do think that this could, like you mentioned, this could be one of those weird Trent Richardson weeks where the Colts get out to an early lead and Pep says, well, now it's time for me to just pound the rock with my big, powerful running back, Trent Richardson. So he might get 20-plus carries, and which means he just has to be a little bit relevant against the Jaguars. If he gets that much of a workload, he might even pop in a touchdown. That's another kind of one of my contrarian plays this week. TJ hit on that for us last week, what a contrarian play was. I think Trent Richardson and also, Torrey Smith is another one that I've been highlighting, but that's not what we're talking about here. Trent Richardson, I think, is kind of a play in daily leagues on the cheap and in tournaments this week, just because he's such a disregarded player. I don't think a lot of guys are going to even roll with him. But anyways, yeah. So I'm going to go with Niall Davis too, because all the reports so far this morning looks like, despite the fact that Jamal Charles was practicing this week, it looks like he's not going to go today. I think, and Davis is he gets too much volume. Too much of a workload for me to pass on him. We saw what he did against Denver, and every time Jamal Charles gets hurt, they just pick up Niall Davis and drop that workload on him. So I think I'm going to go with Davis there and Ellington. So we're a little bit different there. You can, and that question came from @EXRDNA. You can pick there which one you want. We both agree Ellington should go, but we're not sure about that last spot. But excuse me, that question came from @WesternSubs on Twitter. So there's an answer to that question. And last question we got before we get out of here. I got this one while we're on the show. Should I drop my stashed James Starks for Lorenzo Taliaferro? I do not have Eddie Lacy. So we're deciding whether we should drop James Starks for Lorenzo Taliaferro. Dan, which way would you go with this?
This question gets a little intriguing based on Bernard Pierce's injury that we're just now finding out about, that we still don't know too much about. But when Bernard Pierce is healthy, and I assume this is not a serious injury, he's really the lead back there when Baltimore has a lead, and Justin Forsett is going to be the passing down back. So I don't really see much of a role for Taliaferro. I like the way that the Ravens scout their running backs. If you look back over history, they've done a really good job with that. Even guys that they take off the free agent heap like Bobby Rainey have looked pretty good on other teams. But I think that you can just do better from a situation standpoint. I don't love handcuffing, I'm sorry, but I did mention that in elite offenses, I'm fine with handcuffing. So in an elite offense like the Packers offense, I'm fine with Starks. And an interesting thing about Starks is this. In week 1, when the Packers fell behind really, really fast to the Seahawks, Starks got a ton of snaps. He actually only had 3 less. He had 30 to Lacy's 33. So they still see some value in him as a passing down back. So no, I would not cut Starks for Taliaferro.
Yeah, and again, this is one where I differed. I actually I would cut Starks for Taliaferro this week because, I think if you cut Starks, I don't think you have the potential of losing him on the waiver wire. If you make the switch today, and I don't think I don't think Starks is then going to go off today and make you, and then he's going to be a priority pick. I think you can kind of sneak him onto the waiver wire and then get him back on your team if Taliaferro does nothing today. If Pierce doesn't play, I think like in deeper leagues, I'm in a 16-team league and I'm actually considering flexing Taliaferro just because this is a good running game and we'll see what happens. So I would go the other direction and I would drop Starks for Taliaferro, but so we go a little bit different there, and I don't think you can really. It's not too big of a deal if you drop Starks, but so that's our different takes, and that's all the questions we got this week. We had to do a little bit of an earlier start time this week, and we'll probably start a little later, most likely when we can get a little more questions, a little more activity. But I think we had a good show today. We overcame a little bit of technical difficulties there in the middle, and I think we covered the matchups really well today, Dan. So I just want to thank everybody for watching and remind you that this show is brought to you by Sportable.is. It's a great website run by our guy Sal Stefanali, who's just put together a great team of writers, and me. I'm not one of them, but yeah. So a bunch of great guys in the fantasy industry like Dan and so many guys that just contribute on these cards. It's really a short form website where you can get your takes on the go, and it looks great on an iPhone or a mobile device, and you can vote, share your opinions. I'm going to be blurbing all day there actually, and dropping a few little rapid reaction sort of things. So keep your eyes on Sportable. It's definitely an up and comer, and I'm really glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, I can say the same thing. I'm really glad to be a part of it as well. I mean, Sal, who you just mentioned, you guys know him. He's a big guy in the industry, bigger than me and Matt at least. So, I mean, you know him, but he's really done a great job making this a unique site. It's not. I'd love to see people get a little more involved, because really what they're getting here is a site that does two things really well. One, it cuts the clutter in fantasy, and this is huge in my opinion. Not many websites do this. What we try to do at Sportable is just a simple card-based system, which is kind of like an elongated version of a tweet. And the whole point is to get the actual goods, the actual information, the actionable information on each player outlook, team outlook, whatnot, in these cards. And I think we do a great job of it. And that is the second thing that really makes us unique, is that we have a lot of writers from different websites, like Football Guys, where Matt's at. He also writes for Black and Blue Review, covers the Panthers, so he has a great take on that. Does a few other things as far as scouting goes. I forgot which one you're working for there, Matt. But
Optimum Scouting.
Yep, Optimum Scouting. There you go. So you've got really multi-talented people. I know other websites like Pro Football Focus, some Dynasty websites we've got going. So really, we've got a really great team, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. I hope you guys enjoy the show. And one last thing on the show is that you guys make the show, so the more questions we get about your lineup decisions, your trade decisions in the week, you're even looking forward to free agency or spot plays in the next week, daily fantasy questions, love them all. Me and Matt are hopefully improving on our daily, just from the fact that we really look into the matchups a lot. That's what our goal is here on the show, to dive into matchups. Based on the work we do with Pro Football Focus and Football Guys with Matt, we're really tuned into these matchups. So ask us away your questions with start sits. We're going to have an idea. We're going to give you an answer that has to do with who the receivers can match up against that corner, who the offensive lines, the defensive lines, the game flow. We've got it all. So keep them coming with the questions. Thank you for listening. And that's all from me, Matt. Anything more on your end?
Yeah, just again, thanks to the audience, and yeah, keep sending those questions in, man. We love it. We got all the time in the world to answer questions for you guys, and let us be a resource. That's what we're here for. That's what we love doing. So, for Dan, I'm Matt, and we're signing off another week of hot takes and hot cakes. Thanks again.
Thanks.